Ready? Yep. Welcome, everybody. I want to thank you for coming. This is the 50th anniversary Jefferson basketball documentary. We're here with Jack Evans, and Jack was on the sidelines as the head coach for 26 years here. They had 8 conference titles, 8 section titles, 2 consolation state championships, a 3rd place finish, and 4 state titles over that time. We're going to talk to Jack about basketball, but a lot of other things. And Jack, I wanted to ask you first about growing up. You're home with your mom and dad and stuff, and what was life like for you back then, and what were your interests and those times for you?
Well, I grew up in Superior, Wisconsin, and of course, I was born in '34, so we were coming out of the Depression, and there wasn't much going on in schools, no school activities to speak of. And we liked athletics, and we did everything that you could was make up games for yourself. When I got to junior high school, we had about 4 games a year, and we played 3 other junior highs in the city. And so we started to get a little competition, and we always liked it, but there were no gyms to go to work out in. And so there was a YMCA, but the YMCA was booked up with everything Saturday morning. I grew up with a kid named George Hansen, who you may recall was coach at the U, and he and I were best friends. His dad ran the vocational school, and every 4th or 5th Saturday, they would get a load of lumber. And so George and I and 3 or 4 other guys, we'd come and we'd unload the lumber with all the slivers on your fingers, and then we'd shoot baskets for a little bit. So that we got as much as we could. I went to a junior high school that was part of the college campus. All the rest of the junior highs ended in 8th grade. Ours ended at 9th grade. Okay. So when I got to Superior Central, I was a sophomore, and everybody else had been there a year. And when I looked back at those years, all the coaching I had done, the junior and senior years there were 2 of the best teams that I've seen over the years that I was coaching. Just loaded with good athletes. Football, they were number 1 in football in the state, number 1 in basketball. And the last football game of the year, they lost on a 109-yard run from Hurley, Wisconsin. Uh-huh. In basketball, they got beat by Ashland. Okay. Glenn Reed, that name familiar to you?
Sounds
he was
familiar,
on that team. So I had a chance to watch some very, very good athletes and got into it. And we had our practices. We only played like 15 games a year. That's all it was in high school at that time. But we enjoyed every one of them, and I look forward to it. And there was no off-season practice or anything like that. It was just during the season.
Now, did you guys ever get to the state tournament in Wisconsin in high school? Or?
Well, when I was a senior, we had not a real well-balanced team, but we played well together, and we beat our rivals to go to the state tournament. And it was an 8-team tournament. And going to Madison, 400 and some miles away, was a big thrill for all of us. And we got in there, we played the the number 2 ranked team, and we beat them that was Neenah, Wisconsin. Sure. And then we played the number 1 team the next night. And it was South Milwaukee, which ended up winning the state tournament. We lost by 5. So we felt very good about that, and we all had exposure to Madison, and I was named on the All-State team, and got a few offers to go to college.
And then you had an offer to go to Marquette, and you went down there. Do you want to tell us a story about that?
Well, I did to play football and basketball, and I went down there, and I was met and shown around, and I guess you'd call it homesick. And so I stayed there for a week, and then I came back home. And the college in Superior had not started yet. They had preseason practices and so forth. So I didn't enroll. I went up to the registration areas, but I didn't sign any classes. So I came back and I played college football and basketball.
At Superior. Now, the head coach at Marquette then you said was Tex Winter, right?
Tex Winter, yes.
Yeah, and Tex Winter was Phil Jackson's assistant with the Chicago Bulls and then the Lakers after that. Yeah.
And I enjoyed talking with him, and it was very encouraging. But I would just, in fact, one of the recruits that year was the guy who beat us in the Shower. His name was Jay Shower, South Milwaukee, that beat us in the state tournament.
Okay.
And Jack Baradian was another guard on that team, so they were freshmen.
Okay, and they went to Marquette then. And so then you go to Superior. You go back to Superior, and how did college go? I know you did a lot of working along with going to school.
Well, yeah, I of course I didn't have a scholarship, so I started working in a creamery, working nights in a creamery, and weekends, I should say. And then I dropped out of school that first semester, and I worked the next full year, started college the following year, and then I got drafted by Uncle Sam for the Korean War.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to the military, and I thought, well, I'll get that over with, and it's all clear. And running through some night problems in about the 13th week of basic training, I fell and injured my knee, which had been hurt in high school, and so I couldn't do anything, and they gave me an honorable discharge. So I sent back for the Vets Hospital in Minneapolis here and had that taken care of. Then I started again in 1955, and went 4 years and finished my college degree.
Okay. And before we get into moving on beyond college, with all the coaches you had up to that point, were there any that had a larger impact on you, or parents or teachers, anything like that, that formed or molded your philosophy?
Well, I think probably my high school coaches. I did, of course, as a kid at that time, it's kind of changed a little bit now maybe, but they were the epitome. They were like parents to you, and I worshiped them. And my football coach was also a Phi Ed teacher, and my basketball coach was a baseball player at the University of Wisconsin, and I just enjoyed everything he did. And on our college games, we'd travel by bus everywhere, and we'd be coming home from games, lacrosse and so forth, and we're just gone during the day. And I worked all 4 years at the Creamy on weekends. So if we were home, I worked 8 hours, and we played that night, and I worked 8 hours Sunday. But if I came home on a Saturday night, I'd work 8 hours Sunday. But I would sit up and talk with our coaches about coaching and what do they like to do. And one of the things that made good coaches and make good teams. And then at the end of that 4 years, I decided that if I was looking for a coaching job, number one, try to get someplace that had a good reputation over the years. Every year, they're strong, and make sure it's something you like to do. And with that in mind, I sought my first coaching job. My first coaching job was at Mondovi, Wisconsin. They'd won 2 games the year before, and so there was a chance. And Kenny Anderson from Eau Claire knew the coach and talked to him about it. There were probably some better possibilities on that year.
So how old were you at that time?
25.
25.
25. So I was in college, just got married, and that was my first teaching job. I went to Mondovi, and unfortunately we won the conference, and we lost to Menominee, Wisconsin. We played 3 times. We lost by 6 points, a total of 3. One in double overtime, one in a single overtime, and they went on into the state tournament.
Okay, great. So now we haven't talked about, of course, you had a high school sweetheart and then in college, and you got married, and now you're looking at past Mondovi. And why don't you tell us about what happened after Mondovi?
Well, my American history class was right across the hall from the superintendent. So, one morning about 9:30, he knocks on the door and called me out. And I didn't know what it was, and I didn't think I was in trouble. But he said, I got a call from the college coach, or the college president, Wisconsin, Superior. And he wanted to know whether I could be released to come up and finish out the year. The basketball coach at the college, Carl Bergamini, was a colonel in the National Guard. They were activated to go to Fort Lewis, Washington, release troops to go to Korea. And so, a long conversation, and the superintendent said, well, we wouldn't hold you back. That's an opportunity for you. And I had a pretty good college career, so we're looking good for me. So then he said, well, okay, September 6th, you can start at the College of Superior. So that morning of September 6th, my wife was expecting, and she was back in Superior.
Would this be your first?
Yes.
Okay.
It was Jeff. And so that morning I went in, resigned my position, drove up to Superior. 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I signed my contract at College of Superior. About 5 to 12 that night, Jeff was born. So it was a busy
Big day.
And I had a great coach to work with, Don Moselli. It means nothing to you, but when I was a kid at the junior high on the college campus, he was the best football and basketball player at the college.
Okay.
So kind of like my idol.
Right.
And so I worked very well with him and enjoyed a time with him. So that worked out pretty good for that. And then I was baseball coach in the college.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Well, and I don't mean to step back, but there's one thing I wanted to ask you too, because it's quite an interesting fact that you were drafted by the Minneapolis Lakers.
Right.
Right. And tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, I was fortunate enough. I started basketball. My dad worked on the railroad, and he'd bring home some grain doors, and he made a backboard and put a bucket on it. So we played after school on Saturdays, Sundays, and that's where I got the nickname Chopper.
Oh, okay.
You played out in the snow, and you hang up your choppers and dry them out and put another pair on. But I was fortunate enough to lead the Wisconsin State College in scoring 2 straight years. And so, I interviewed with the Lakers, and I was realistic enough. I was 25 then, and I was 5'10". And I wasn't going to. I talked to the administration at that time. I forget the guy from Notre Dame. He's 6'10". He's going up picking dimes off the top of the backboard. And I wasn't going to be in that type of surrounding. So I had the offer from Mondovi, and I took that.
Okay. Did you meet Sid Hartman at that time at all?
No, I didn't.
You didn't. He's involved with them, I think.
No, I didn't.